I just don't think it helps in the medium and long term achieve what we want to achieve, which is to get the best deal that we can get in the current circumstances.
Scott and Frisco back on a closer look on this Friday, getting set for the weekend. Game one of the Jays and Dodgers tonight at Rogers Center. If you're Doug Ford, are you sitting in your man cave? That's where he's watching the game from tonight, so he says, thinking, man, did I just blow up the Canada-U.S. Trade deal?
Or he's sitting there thinking, man, I spent $75 million on these ads, but they're getting way more out of them because of the fact that Donald Trump's so angry about them.
Yeah, it's the story broke last night. Trump tweeted out, or on Truth Social or whatever network he was on last night, saying, that's it. Canada's behavior is egregious.
Yes. And
I'm done talking trade deals.
He said it's all the Ford government's ads that we did a show about it a few days ago.
We did, yeah.
The government spending $75 million to run anti-tariff ads, a network south of the border featuring none other than Ronald Reagan in a famous 1987 address about the dangers of protectionism and why free trade is a better option. And Donald Trump reportedly saw the ad during Game 7 of the Jays Mariners series of the ALCS and wasn't too happy, but things have boiled over. And now it's become the whole reason why trade talks are apparently off. Some people are supporting Doug Ford. He's doubled down, saying he's not going to pull the ads. In fact, he said they're going to run in the World Series game.
They're scheduled to run tonight.
So we're going to talk all about that tonight with someone who knows the issue pretty well. Julian Karagesian is a professor of economics at McGill University. He also was a senior advisor in the finance ministry back in the day. So I'll be very interested to hear his thoughts on all this.
Well, if he didn't already, Donald Trump certainly knows who Doug Ford is now. The U.S. president has abruptly canceled all trade talks with Canada because he's furious with the Ford government's new anti-tariff commercial that features the voice of none other than Ronald Reagan. Here to help us break down all of the angles of this developing story is Julian Karagesian, an economics professor at McGill University and a former special advisor at the federal finance minister. Julian, thanks so much for being here tonight. We know it's a busy day for you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. As you know, Julian, the Ford government recently announced it was spending $75 million on anti-tariff ads set to run on networks south of the border. Before we get into specifics, I'd like to just play the ad so that we can get a refresher and all hear it again, and so our audience can as well. Sure. Derek, can you hit go for us?
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Some would say, Julian, that's a pretty effective use of ad space. What do you think?
Well, it's an advertisement in a country that's been increasingly split right down the middle, Republican, Democrat, coast, interior, Wall Street versus Main Street. It's been increasingly split along 50-50 lines since the mid-1990s. And we have to, remember that almost 80 million people, voters voted for Donald Trump, and he won a majority and he won all the swing states. He's not going to have to run again. And so putting an advertisement like that, it does hit close to home, and it's effective in some ways because it's taking the original "Make America Great" slogan from Ronald Reagan and showing that, Ronald Reagan was a free trader. And the suggestion is that he would be strongly against tariffs like this. Although in the 1980s, in the second term of Ronald Reagan and then in the first term of George Bush, there were all kinds of restrictions put on certain aspects of United States trade, particularly in the automobile sector. So, but I think Premier Ford's heart is in the right place. His intentions are good. Ontario is the most exposed province to what's going on in the United States. This kind of slow pulling up of the drawbridge and the building of high tariff barriers. So they're exposed. He's the steward of the province, so it's completely understandable. I just don't know if this is going to help. I think it does more damage than good because we have the federal government, which has purview over international trade, taking a lot of action, keeping a good chunk of its cabinet down in Washington and negotiating the details. And so I'm not sure if poking the bear in this case is the best idea.
Were you worried something like this might happen when you first saw the ad, knowing the way Donald Trump is? Were you worried he might have reacted this way?
Yes, I was actually immediately because, we all know that for whatever else anyone wants to say about President Trump, that he can be volatile, he can be unpredictable, and he can be irascible. And this hits close to home because Donald Trump has made all kinds of references to the original MAGA movement and to the golden era that he considers the golden era of Ronald Reagan in the booming 80s and also before that. And so I figured, yep, that's going to get his back up right away, just as Prime Minister Carney and, key cabinet ministers have been, negotiating a deal on sectoral tariffs.
Julian, you mentioned the term poking the bear, which is a great parallel. Do you think, in your opinion, that the province should pull the ads?
I do. Now, maybe, I'm not an insider on this. So, maybe there's a good cop, bad cop dynamic that was planned, but I don't think so. I don't think Prime Minister Carney can micromanage the 10 premiers and 3 heads of our territorial governments. But I do think on his own volition, the premier should withdraw the ads just so that we can get back, not out of any. And I don't say that out of, we should be fearful of the bear. I just don't think it helps in the medium and long term achieve what we want to achieve, which is to get the best deal that we can get in the current circumstances.
It's interesting because he's sort of doubled down from what we've seen in the media today. He's told the Globe and Mail that these ads are going to run tonight during the World Series. I think his Premier Wab Canoe in Manitoba is giving him the shout outs on social media saying this is a great thing. What do you think is going on behind the scenes in the Ford camp first in terms of how they're thinking about what's happened?
Well, at one level, they could be thinking that it's partially successful or fully successful because it's got the attention of President Trump. But President Trump is a high stakes poker player, and and a negotiator, whatever else we want to say. And so he's canceled the trade talks. And we know that he can sometimes come back from a very strong position, or he can stick with one and double down. And so I would say, what is this? Is this going to move the dial on anything in the Trump administration, given that President Trump himself is not running again? He doesn't have to get a third mandate. He's got his second and final mandate. And so he doesn't have to win the swing states. And in fact, what he's doing on automobiles and steel and other sectoral tariffs, I think they're aiming to get a long-term majority in the swing states by, bringing back investment as they see this. I don't think it's a good idea, but they see themselves as bringing back manufacturing and jobs to the Rust Belt. And so I don't think this is going to stop them.
I do want to get into that, what you're talking about there as well, but we assume Donald Trump's not running for a third term. There's always the rumblings about those things. That might be another discussion, but go ahead, Scott.
Okay, so conversely to Julian, to Frisco's point, you touched on what the Ford camp is doing. Mark Carney is on a plane right now to South Korea. Is he shaking his head saying, Doug, what the hell have you done?
I would guess, if I had to guess, I would say he's probably thinking, we're zigzagging the country. We're going to Washington. We're going to Europe. We're zigzagging the world. We're really doing our best. And they were probably making progress, at least on aluminum and perhaps on steel. As we see, automobiles is a much more difficult one, and we have the American producers pulling out to some extent. And unfortunately, I expect that to continue. So I do think there's a bit of head shaking because some grinding progress was being made.
We're not an economics podcast, obviously, Professor, but you did bring up a great point just a minute ago about how America is trying to bring manufacturing back. And this is what I'm trying to get my head around. I'm a somewhat smart person. I'm not super intelligent, but the question, I guess, on everyone's mind is this working? I mean, Trump is telling the American people we are going to go full bore on tariffs. This is going to bring back American strength in the economy. It's going to help us with our deficits. While there's people who are against it are saying, no, these costs will eventually get passed on to the consumer. Prices will rise. Inflation will rise. Which is correct?
Well, I think that if these tariffs are kept in long enough, I mean, I'll just start at a very high level at 36,000 feet. The United States, probably along with China, but for sure the United States is one of the only countries in the world that could build a wall around itself and still prosper because it's got such an immense internal market and it's got 345 million people. And probably China, with its immense population, could do the same thing. They could survive and probably prosper. And it would be difficult for every other country to do that. And I think Trump probably has a sense of that. I think he's also extremely clever politically in having tapped into the Tea Party movement that came out of the financial crisis, and then tapped into the simmering rage of the deindustrialization of the Rust Belt, which actually took place under Reagan's 2 terms, under Bush 1's only term, and then accelerated under Bill Clinton's 2 terms, and accelerated even more under the Bush 2 terms. So you had a deindustrialization of the United States, and in the wake of that, you had people having easy access to credit. And so people, the so-called blue collar class, I don't like that term, the whole tens of millions of Americans that were able to get well-paid jobs in manufacturing without having a college degree. And also it's fundamental to a wealth of economy to have manufacturing. This was hollowed out over 3 decades, and it ended with the financial crisis because that's when easy access to credit ended. And Trump tapped into that, and his whole modus operandi is disruption. I'm going to disrupt deep globalization with tariffs, with extreme trade policy uncertainty. I'm going to short circuit the global economy in the gamble that this will bring manufacturing back to the United States. To answer your question, I do think that it can bring manufacturing back to the United States. But the thing is that if you want to be competitive in this world with manufacturing, then you have to robotize your factories. You have to automate them. So in terms of jobs, it's not clear whether it's going to move the needle. But in terms of manufacturing, we're already seeing the United States under President Trump use a mixture of uncertainty, tariffs, and pressure on allies to move investment and industry back to the United States. So that can work. It will also raise prices. And I think Trump's economists know that, but they're making a gamble that well-paid jobs in the Rust Belt will offset the anger about rising prices.
Absolutely. And we're seeing the reversal here. I feel like every day in the headlines we're hearing about a new company that's closing or a new factory that's shutting down and hundreds or thousands of jobs lost. I think there's still some extent, Julian, where some Canadians don't think this is as serious as it is, and they think it's still kind of funny, and that this will all pass. This is just something that's going to pass. But we're seeing the real effect of this. How devastating is this for the Canadian economy, and how bad is it going to get?
Well, at the moment, as we know, there's 85% of merchandise exports from Canada to the United States, which are compliant with the Free Trade Agreement, which is renamed CUSMA. Those are going in tariff-free. But these sectoral tariffs, I think some of them are here, maybe not aluminum. I think the Americans don't really make any aluminum. So I think we'll probably get a break on that. But the automobile sector and steel, Those were essential to the Rust Belt and parts of the Bible Belt. And I just don't see that changing. And one thing that Donald Trump's been consistent on when he was president in his first term, his second term, before he became president, going all the way back to the 80s, if you YouTube it enough, you can get, or if you research it enough, you can see that Donald Trump, way back to the mid 80s, was saying that any car sold in the United States should be made in the United States or subject to a tariff and a quota. And so, and another thing is, I think we need to see this in a longer term sense. The United States border with the rest of the world has been thickening since 9/11, first for security reasons, legitimate security reasons. And so this is a long-term trend. Another thing is, can we really imagine any political leader in the Democrat or Republican Party running in the next election or in the midterms on a free trade ticket? On a, let's open up the border with Canada and Mexico again. I just can't imagine that right now.
Which also, I can't imagine what it's like then to be on the Carney team trying to negotiate this, right? You have, like you said, a president who for decades has been saying, like you just said about automobiles, for example, how do they make any headway? How do you even negotiate it? Or is there even a possibility that there'll be some positive news out of these negotiations at some point?
Well, they have more cards than we do. I think somebody like Prime Minister Carney understands the balance of power in this equation, but we do have cards. We are an intrinsically very rich country, and also officially we're still one of the top 10 wealthiest countries in the world, and we're 41 million people sitting on the second largest inheritance of energy and natural resources after Russia, and so we have the third largest supply of fresh water. And again, we're only 41 million people. So we have cards. We supply a lot of vital resources to the United States, whether it's uranium or potash or carbon-free nickel, right along the line, water, oil, gas. And so I'm not someone who's, think like in the same camp as Premier Ford, say, let's hit back. I like the idea of, let's not retaliate because that will cause inflation here. And let's sit down and see where we can carve out a deal. I'm also of the opinion that if too much is asked of Canada, it's possible that no deal might be better than a terrible deal. And we can remember, and this will be painful to do this because it's a medium and long term thing, but we should remember that 95% of the world's population resides outside of the United States and 75% of the world's GDP. Now, having said that, I think the United States will always be our largest trading partner. By virtue of history and geography and language and culture. And we have a long history of friendship and being allies and fighting in wars together. But they are reversing deep globalization and trying to bend the global economy back to their interests. And we have to understand that we have to accept, I should say, that this might be a medium-term phenomenon and even long-term. And so what do we do? And how do we protect our prosperity?
Julian, we won't keep you too much longer. We know you've got plenty more interviews to do. We've heard a lot from Prime Minister Carney about Canada's need to diversify our trade ties with other countries and build resilience at home because the old relationship, obviously, that we had with the U.S. is officially dead and will never be the same, or at least not the way that we once knew it. From an economic perspective, can we ever really replace what we once had with our southern neighbors?
Well, we can't fully replace the trade. I mean, we do about $1 trillion of two-way business imports and exports with the United States. Our next largest trading partner, if you don't count all of the European Union, is China. And then it's some other countries, but we could do a lot more business with East Asia because we are a natural resource and energy superpower. And China, Korea, and Japan and Taiwan, those are manufacturing. You put them all together, that's a manufacturing superpower. They need everything that we have, and we need a lot of the manufactured goods that they have. So I don't think we can replace. I think the goal should be to secure as much of the American market as we can. And again, they're going to be our largest trading partner, but to get new export growth in East Asia, in China, in India, and I would say in the global South generally, where in the global South, 75% of the world's population resides. Most of the populations, apart from China, are young. It's the dynamic part of the world. There's a lot of growth, and I think we can tap into that, but it's going to take time.
I guess the crystal ball question is, how long do we have to deal with this? Like, how long will the pain last until we kind of get to the other side?
Well, I think it's going to last at least right through the Trump second term,
Wow,
and possibly beyond, depending on what's going on in the United States. If they're experiencing difficult economic times ahead of the next presidential election, we could see candidates emerge that want to go even tougher on international trade.
Sure. Does it make the World Series a little more interesting for you, Julian?
It does. It very much does.
Yeah, it's just all of a sudden it was one. There's always the cross-border rivalry, Canada's team, but with all this going on a couple hours before first pitch, it should make it a little more interesting. I do want to. Sorry,
go ahead.
I do want to ask you one more thing about the Ronald Reagan video, because of course the Ronald Reagan Foundation is saying that, I think the quote was that the advertisement misrepresented what he had actually said in that address, and they've also suggested that they're reviewing their legal options because they're not sure if Ontario had permission to even use that. You've listened to the whole speech. You know how Ronald Reagan felt about free trade. Do you feel that the ad misrepresented his thoughts?
I don't. That's a tough question. I don't know if it misrepresented his thoughts, but I do know I have studied in detail, and I lived through it as a child and young adult, the two Reagan administrations, and I entered economics in the 1990s, and so that was fresh off two Reagan administrations and Bush one for his first term, and I wouldn't say that they were total free traders. They ignited, along with the Thatcher government in the UK, they ignited the era of deep globalization. But towards the end of the 80s, including in the latter part of Ronald Reagan's second term and Bush's first term, you saw already the use of restrictive trade measures to deal with the rapid expansion of Japanese automakers around the world. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if it's a misrepresentation, but it's very complicated because I don't think they were ever total free traders.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'd love to be a fly on the wall in Kuala Lumpur, where Trump and Carney are both headed to the same meeting. Julian, we know you're tight for time. Anything that we didn't cover tonight that you'd like to mention?
Well, just that I would just say this, that we cannot, and again, Prime Minister Carney said this morning on his way to Asia, we cannot control what the Trump administration and the United States of America does with its trade policy. We can only influence their thinking as best we can, but they've been going in a certain direction for over a decade and a half, even more, since 9/11. So it's 2 decades. I think the reform pillars of the government of Prime Minister Carney, internal free trade, export diversification, and also these nation building projects. I think we have to get behind some of these things because we need a modern infrastructure, and we need new ports, and we need new railroads, and we need new infrastructure, and we need to be able to get to the resources that make us a natural resource superpower.
Mm-hmm. All right, from McGill University on this Friday night, there's Julian Karagesian. Julian, appreciate your time tonight. Have a wonderful weekend, and go Jays.
Thank you. You too. Yeah, and I hope we get a win here.
Man, to be a fly on the wall in either one of those camps, or in Ford's man cave tonight, watching the game, you got to wonder what's going through their minds.
And what each team is thinking about what happened. But you have to imagine one day someone will write a book about it. Carney must have already talked to Ford about those ads, because they were at a phone call. Well, they were at a press conference the other day, right?
Yeah.
So they've talked that Ford and Carney have said, and Carney must have said something about it, and maybe Ford even asked and said, "What do you think of these ads? Do you think we should do it?" Because do you really want to get, not conspiracy, but Carney's the team is the one negotiating, so he can say to Trump, "Well, that's just some premier deal. I had nothing to do with that," but it's still good because
it's stuck.
It gets him fired up, and we talked about what $75 million, is that a waste of money? We could spend this somewhere else. He definitely got way more than $75 million worth, because Trump's fury has just given those ads such a widespread, so many
but if it does end up, and look, I mean, Trump was probably looking for a reason anyway to pull the pin, and this was just convenient. Yeah. I did love your point, though, about, people thinking this wasn't going to last very long, and some, joking about it almost. It's almost kind of like COVID, right? Where people thought, it's only going to be a couple of weeks. We'll be fine.
It'll be fine. Yeah.
And now Julian is saying, the entire Trump term.
Yeah, well, we see it in communities all over Ontario, which is where we're based. Our sites every day report on concerns about the economy, people losing their jobs. In this community where we are today, is Sault Ste. Marie, we know that people are losing their jobs, include not just at the steel plant for sure, but at other places as well. We're in for a rough ride for the next couple of years. And, I don't know. It's not one of those things where there's going to be a simple fix. And I understand when I listen to what Carney's saying, when I listen to what Poilievre is saying, they both make sense. Yep. Carney in particular talking about how we need to expand our markets and make ties with other countries, which is what he's doing today. Makes total sense, but how long is that going to take? Well, it's like saying we're going to build the whale sanctuary for the whales at Marineland. Well, that's not going to happen by tomorrow.
Beluga update: they're still alive and somewhat well.
That's what I've heard. We'll maybe have more on that next week.
You never know. All right, we got a weekend to start, as do you. We appreciate your time this week. Derek Turner, producer of this evening's program. As always, closerlookpodcast.ca is our website. Closer Look at villagemedia.ca if you'd like to reach out. For Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday night at 7 right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.